My sister crossed the line with my fiancé, and my parents defended her. Now they're begging me to come back. But I left them with something they'll never forget. You grow up thinking your family will always protect you, that when someone hurts you, especially someone from the outside, your parents will fight for you without hesitation. What no one prepares you for is when the people who are supposed to shield you become the ones holding the knife. And worse, when they smile while doing it. For most of my life, I thought I was being the bigger person, the one who held the family together, the one who understood that Chloe, my little sister, just needed more attention, that I could handle the sacrifices because I was stronger, more grounded, more mature. I was wrong. I spent years excusing behavior that should have set off sirens. I brushed off the fact that Chloe always wanted what I had. I told myself it was just sister stuff, that it would pass. But what she did with Daniel, my fiancé, was not sibling rivalry. It wasn't a misunderstanding or a phase. It was war. And my parents, God help me, chose her side. They looked me in the eye and said she was fragile, that I needed to be compassionate, that family is complicated and forgiveness is noble. But they didn't see the message she left me. They didn't hear her voice, calm and calculated, telling me how I didn't deserve the life I was building. They didn't watch her smile while she tried to burn it all down. This isn't a story about jealousy. It's about betrayal. It's about how someone you share a childhood with can turn into your greatest threat, and how the people who raised you can betray you in the name of peace. I am not telling this story because I want sympathy. I don't need anyone to feel bad for me. I'm telling this story because for too long I stayed silent. I smiled through teeth I wanted to clench. I posed for photos with people who would later break my heart. That silence is over. Chloe crossed a line. Not just with me, but with decency, with trust, with every ounce of humanity I had left to give her, and when she did, she didn't just break my engagement. She cracked open the truth about our entire family. So, no, I didn't forgive. I didn't forget. I didn't stay quiet. And now, as they beg me to return to rebuild what they destroyed, I am the one holding the power, and I will never give it back. My name is Julia. I'm 27 years old, and for most of my life I believed that being the older sister meant swallowing my pride. I grew up in a suburban neighborhood just outside Portland, Oregon, in a home that looked perfect from the outside. My parents are both lawyers. Sharp suits, sharper tongues, and a reputation to protect. My mother is the kind of woman who has never cried in public, and my father believes emotions are a distraction from logic. I was the firstborn, the quiet one, the achiever. I was reading by age 4, won every spelling bee through middle school, and was the first in my class to get accepted into a competitive interior design program in California. Chloe came 4 years later, and from the moment she arrived, the energy in the house changed. She was loud, demanding, dramatic, and everyone found it charming. She had curls like a doll and a laugh that made strangers smile. While I was praised for my discipline, Chloe was adored for her spontaneity. She broke rules and got hugs. I followed them and got a nod. When we were younger, it felt manageable. I chalked it up to personality differences. I figured our parents just related to her differently. But as we got older, the difference in treatment became impossible to ignore. If I missed curfew, I was grounded for 2 weeks. If Chloe didn't come home until dawn, Mom would say she was just exploring herself. When I caught Chloe wearing my prom dress without asking, she cried and said she just wanted to feel pretty. Mom called it sweet. I called it theft. I began to learn that in our family, Chloe's feelings were facts, and mine were overreactions. Still, I never confronted it. I thought if I worked harder, proved myself more, they'd see me too. I graduated with honors, built a freelance design business from scratch, and started renting a small but beautiful apartment in downtown Portland. I had clients, a stable income, and a life I was proud of. I even paid for most of Chloe's first year of college after she failed to land a scholarship. She dropped out by year 2 and never paid me back. I didn't bring it up. That was the pattern. Chloe made messes, I cleaned them up. She cried, I consoled. She took, I gave. Until Daniel. Meeting Daniel changed everything. He was calm, emotionally intelligent, and attentive in a way that made me feel safe. We met at a yoga class, both of us stretching awkwardly and laughing at ourselves. He listened when I spoke. Really listened. After 3 years together, we were engaged. He proposed on the balcony of our favorite bookstore cafe, and I said yes through tears and laughter. For the first time, I felt like I was building something no one could take from me. I didn't introduce Daniel to my family right away. Part of me was scared, not of him meeting them, but of what they might do to this one good thing in my life. I told him stories, of course, softened versions of my childhood, of Chloe's attention-seeking, of how I always felt like a background character in my own home. Daniel said all the right things, that he'd be there for me, that I wasn't invisible, that I mattered. I wanted to believe him. I did. So after months of delaying, I agreed to bring him to our family's summer barbecue. It was supposed to be simple, casual, just one afternoon. But it turned into the beginning of the unraveling. Chloe greeted him like a long-lost lover, and I saw it, the look in her eyes. That spark I'd seen too many times before. The one that meant something I loved was about to break. Growing up with Chloe wasn't just a matter of sibling rivalry. It was a constant lesson in erasure. I learned early that when Chloe cried, the world stopped spinning. When I cried, I was told to toughen up. Our parents never said it out loud, but the hierarchy in our house was as clear as the lines in my report cards. Chloe's emotions were prioritized, her mistakes forgiven, her desires accommodated. I used to keep a journal when I was 10. One day, Chloe found it and read it aloud during a family gathering. She laughed as she mocked the way I had written about a boy I liked. Our parents chuckled. I was mortified. I ran to my room, tears burning my face, and Mom followed me, not to comfort me, but to say, "You know your sister has a playful spirit. Don't be so sensitive." That phrase became a theme. Don't be so sensitive. Don't overreact. Don't ruin the mood. When I was 13, I got my first serious solo art exhibit in the school fair. I spent weeks designing a miniature model of a sustainable house, something I was truly proud of. The night before the presentation, Chloe spilled red juice on the entire thing. She cried, said it was an accident, and my parents hugged her while I sat on the floor trying to salvage warped cardboard and sticky paper. No consequences. No apology. Just another moment where I was expected to move on. Later that same year, I started tutoring to earn some extra money. Chloe borrowed my cash from the jar I kept in my drawer. I found out weeks later, and when I confronted her, she cried again, said she needed it for a dress. My parents reimbursed me and told me I should be proud to help my sister feel confident. By the time I was in college, I had learned to compartmentalize. I kept Chloe out of my adult life as much as possible. I didn't bring boyfriends home. I didn't talk about my personal successes. I showed up for holidays and smiled for photos. I played my part, hoping distance would protect what little self-respect I had left. But Chloe always found ways in. She borrowed my clothes without asking. She shared edited versions of my stories online, making herself the heroine. She even once lied to my friends, saying I had cheated on an ex when it was she who had been caught texting him behind my back. Each time I confronted her gently, privately, hoping she would understand how much it hurt. Each time she cried, denied, twisted it into something about me being jealous or uptight. And each time my parents told me to let it go. Chloe has a wild heart, they said. She'll grow out of it. But she didn't grow out of it. She grew better at it, more manipulative, more subtle. She learned to play people like instruments. I once overheard her on the phone with a friend describing how easy it was to get Mom to take her side by pretending to be anxious. That word anxious became her shield. Anytime she faced consequences, she folded into fragility, and our parents, terrified of being bad caregivers, gave her whatever she wanted. Meanwhile, I was left holding the bag. When I was 23, I got my first big design client, a boutique hotel looking to renovate their suites. I was ecstatic. Chloe posted a story that same day claiming she had just started design consulting and was booking clients. She wasn't. But when I called her out, she said I was gatekeeping creativity. Our mother told me to stop being insecure, that there was room for both of us. But Chloe wasn't trying to build something. She was trying to steal mine. I began therapy shortly after that. It was the first time someone told me what I'd been experiencing wasn't normal. That being constantly dismissed and gaslit by family is a form of trauma. I didn't want to believe it. I still wanted to think I had a normal family. But slowly I began to see. I had been conditioned to accept mistreatment as love. I had been taught that loyalty meant silence, and I carried that belief right into adulthood, right into my relationship with Daniel. I didn't tell him the full truth about Chloe, not at first. I didn't want him to think less of my family. I didn't want to be the girl with drama. But the drama was always there. I just wasn't ready to admit that my sister wasn't just difficult, she was dangerous. And my silence had given her space to grow bolder, until she set her sights on him. I should have trusted my instincts the moment she hugged him. We were at my parents' annual summer barbecue, a casual get-together with too much sangria and too many conversations about mortgages and whose kid got into what school. I had prepped Daniel the night before, warning him that my family was a little intense and that Chloe could be unpredictable. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and told me not to worry. I had no idea that would be the last day I ever looked at my family the same. When we arrived, everything seemed normal at first. My mother greeted Daniel with exaggerated warmth, already asking about his job before he'd even taken off his shoes. My father gave his usual nod of approval, which in his world was the equivalent of a bear hug. And then Chloe appeared. She looked like she had stepped out of a magazine, long waves, dramatic eyeliner, and a dress far too short for a family barbecue. She squealed, ran to Daniel, and threw her arms around him. It wasn't just the hug, it was the way she lingered, the way her hands moved slowly down his back before pulling away. I caught Daniel's eye. He looked surprised, maybe a little uncomfortable, but he played it off with a polite smile. "I've heard so much about you," Chloe said, eyes locked on him. "You're even cuter than Julia described." I laughed awkwardly, trying to change the subject, but something had shifted. During the next hour, Chloe found every excuse to be near him. She sat beside him during dinner, even though I had clearly set up the seating. She offered him drinks, wiped imaginary crumbs off his shirt, and asked invasive questions about our relationship. Daniel tried to keep the conversation neutral, but Chloe pushed. "So, when did you know Julia was the one?" she asked, twirling her hair. "Was it instant, or did she have to convince you?" He smiled, patient as always, and said something about how connection takes time. But I saw the flicker of confusion in his eyes. Chloe wasn't being subtle. After dinner, she suggested a game of charades. Daniel politely declined, saying he had a bit of a headache. Chloe pouted and offered to get him aspirin. I intercepted her and did it myself. When I returned, I found her sitting in his seat. My seat. Legs crossed, sipping his drink. I didn't say anything in front of everyone, but my jaw clenched so tight I felt a headache of my own. On the way home, I asked Daniel if he felt anything strange about Chloe. He shrugged. "She's a little much," he said, "but she's your sister. I'm sure she means well." I wanted to believe that too. But the next morning, I found a message from Chloe in my inbox. No greeting, no context, just one line. "You always get what you want, but that doesn't mean you deserve it." My stomach dropped. I showed it to Daniel. He frowned, but said maybe it was a joke, maybe she was venting. He didn't want to make assumptions. I didn't either. But something was building. Over the next few days, Chloe began texting Daniel directly. At first it was innocent, questions about barbecue recipes, jokes about childhood memories. But then came the selfies. Midday. Makeup heavy. Captions like, "Felt cute, don't roast me." One day, she sent him a photo from inside a dressing room, asking if the dress was too much for a wedding. Our wedding hadn't even been scheduled yet. Daniel showed me every message. He didn't respond to the inappropriate ones, but he didn't block her either. He said he didn't want to create more drama. I agreed, or maybe I just wasn't ready to face what was happening. Then came the voicemail. I was making dinner when my phone lit up with a voice message from Chloe. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. Calm, controlled. "He's not yours, Julia. You don't even see it. You're clinging to something that doesn't belong to you. He needs someone who makes him feel alive, not someone who makes lists and schedules. You're a habit. I'm a risk. And everyone knows which one he wants more." I stood frozen in my kitchen knife still in hand. I replayed it 3 times. Every word hit like a slap. I showed it to Daniel. He was horrified. "I had no idea she felt that way," he said. This is not okay." He blocked her number immediately. "We agreed to stay away from my family for a while. But Chloe wasn't done. A week later, I walked into our apartment and found her sitting on our couch. She had used the emergency key my mother had kept without telling me. Daniel wasn't home yet. Chloe stood smiling. "We need to talk," she said. I told her to leave. She didn't move. "You don't scare me, Julia. You never did. You think you're better than me because you're quiet and collected. But you're boring, and boring girls always lose in the end." I walked to the door and opened it. "Get out!" She walked past me slowly, deliberately, and as she crossed the threshold, she whispered, "You'll see. He'll come to me. They always do." That was the night I knew this wasn't just about Daniel. It never had been. This was about control. About destroying anything I loved just to prove she could. The next time I saw Chloe was at our parents' house for what was supposed to be a neutral family dinner. It had been a few weeks since the voicemail since she broke into our apartment since Daniel blocked her. My mother called and said Dad's birthday was coming up and it would mean a lot if we all sat down together like a family. She promised that Chloe would behave, that they had spoken to her, that she was going through a rough patch and wanted to apologize. I hesitated, but Daniel encouraged me to go. He said it might bring some closure, that maybe if my parents saw how serious the situation was, they would finally take it seriously. I didn't believe that, but I agreed. We arrived just before dinner. Chloe was already there, sitting pretty in a pale pink blouse, sipping wine and chatting with my mother as if nothing had ever happened. She smiled when she saw us. "You came," she said, like she was pleased, like we were old friends reconnecting. I ignored her and followed Daniel into the dining room. The tension was thick. My father tried to talk about the weather. My mother asked Daniel about work. Chloe kept stealing glances, smiling too long, brushing her hair behind her ear every time he looked her way. And then during dessert, it happened. Chloe got up from her seat, walked around the table and placed her hand on Daniel's shoulder. "I'm really sorry for the confusion," she said sweetly. "I just get carried away sometimes." Daniel tensed. "Please don't touch me," he said, firm but calm. My parents froze. My mother's eyes widened. "Chloe was just trying to make peace," she said. "There's no need to escalate." I stared at all of them. "Escalate? Are you kidding me?" Chloe turned to me. "You're so dramatic, Julia. I'm trying to fix this. You're the one who always makes things worse." And then she started crying, right there in front of everyone. Hands shaking, voice cracking, eyes full of pain. "I made a mistake," she sobbed. "But I didn't do it to hurt you. I've always felt so invisible. You're the one who has it all. The career, the fiancé, the perfect life. And I just wanted to feel seen." I looked at my mother expecting her to see through it, but she reached for Chloe's hand. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "we know you didn't mean to cause harm." Daniel stood up. "I'm done," he said. "This is insane." I stood too. "You knew what she did. You heard the voicemail. She broke into our home." My father shook his head. "That's a stretch. She used a key, and she just wanted to talk." I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. "You're defending her. After everything." My mother looked at me, her expression unreadable. "She's your sister. Family is complicated." "No," I said. "Family isn't complicated. It's supposed to be safe." "This isn't safe." Chloe was still sniffling now, wrapped in my mother's arms like a child. My father crossed his arms. "You need to let this go, Julia. You're making this bigger than it is." "Bigger than it is," I repeated. "She tried to steal my fiancé. She invaded my home. She's been manipulating all of us for years." "You're overreacting," my mother said quietly. And that was it. That was the moment something snapped. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice message, and played it on speaker. Chloe's voice filled the room. Every word, every whisper. When it ended, there was silence. My father stared at the table. My mother's hand froze mid-stroke on Chloe's arm. Chloe didn't cry this time. She just glared at me. "So what?" she said coldly. "You think this makes you the good one?" Daniel looked at me. "Let's go." And we did. We walked out the front door and didn't look back. I didn't wait for an apology. I didn't need one. That night, I sent an email to both my parents. It was long, detailed. included screenshots of texts, records of the break-in, even the full transcript of the voicemail. I told them I was done, that I didn't feel safe with them, that until they acknowledged what Chloe had done and their role in enabling her, I wanted no contact. My father never replied. My mother wrote one sentence. "This is disappointing." The next morning, I changed the locks again, deleted the family chat, and blocked Chloe's number. I thought that would be the end of it. But it was only the beginning of what I now call my freedom. For a few weeks, there was silence. No calls. No texts. I thought maybe they had finally understood that I was serious, that I wasn't bluffing or being emotional, that I was setting a boundary not as punishment, but as protection. I felt lighter. Daniel and I took a trip to the coast, stayed in a cabin with no cell service, and for the first time in months, I slept without waking up in panic. But when we got back, it all came crashing in. My mother left a voicemail. She sounded calm at first, then her voice cracked. "Julia, we miss you. Your father's heart hasn't been the same. Chloe's not doing well. She's been seeing someone, a professional. Can we please talk?" I ignored it. Then came the email. It was from my father. Just 2 lines. Enough is enough. Family doesn't abandon each other. You're embarrassing yourself. I felt like I was being yanked backward into some twisted alternate reality. I replied once. I wrote, "I am not abandoning anyone. I am protecting myself from a dynamic that has harmed me for years. If you can't acknowledge that, then this conversation is over." I thought that would be the end. But Chloe, of course, took it further. She posted a long message on social media about how forgiveness is the only path to healing, how some people carry bitterness and refuse to see how much love surrounds them. She didn't mention me by name, but her friends knew. Some of them commented things like, "You've always had such a kind soul," or "Some sisters just don't know how to appreciate family." I stayed quiet. I didn't respond. But it hurt. The way she spun the story, the way my parents allowed it, the way no one stood up to say, actually, Julia was the one being targeted. A week later, I found out from a mutual friend that my mother had been calling extended family members, telling them I was going through something and needed space but would come around eventually. She made it sound like I was having some emotional breakdown, like I wasn't thinking clearly, like the problem wasn't Chloe's behavior, but my reaction to it. That's when I realized this wasn't just denial. It was gaslighting. It was an orchestrated effort to protect their version of the truth, to preserve their image, to keep the narrative clean. Chloe was the misunderstood little sister. I was the cold, resentful older one who couldn't let go, the one who always needed things to be perfect, the one who didn't understand forgiveness. I started questioning myself. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I should have handled it differently. Maybe I should have been more patient. But then I remembered the look in Daniel's eyes that night, the fear, the violation, the sheer disbelief that someone could behave that way and then act like nothing had happened. He reminded me that what I was feeling wasn't dramatic. It was real, it was valid, and it was necessary. Still, the isolation was suffocating. Every holiday passed like a wound. Photos of family gatherings without me. Posts about Chloe's growth journey and my parents' resilience. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding my life brick by brick, therapy, journaling, long walks, relearning how to trust my own memory, and every so often another email would come, another guilt trip, another vague promise that things could be different if I'd just come home. But home wasn't a place anymore. It was a boundary. It was the line I had drawn, and crossing it meant betraying myself all over again. Daniel was my rock through all of it. He never once questioned my decisions. He reminded me every day that I deserved peace, that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't cruel, that I was brave. But part of me still ached. Not for their approval, but for the idea that maybe one day they'd look in the mirror and finally see what they had done. Not just to me, but to the version of Chloe they enabled. The one who thought love meant possession, who thought control was affection, who believed that the world owed her everything because no one ever told her no. And maybe if they had done that, if they had told her no, even once, I wouldn't have had to. The real turning point wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a screaming match or a surprise confrontation. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting on the floor of my apartment sorting through receipts and paperwork for a project proposal when I got a message from a former college professor. She was now the director of an eco-architecture firm based in Vermont. She'd seen some of my recent designs online and asked if I would be interested in relocating and working on a series of boutique sustainable cabins. I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I didn't want it. I did. It was my dream job. But part of me was still tethered to the idea that I couldn't leave, that I had to stay near my family, that I might still fix this mess. But then I thought about everything I had endured, the years of quiet compromise, the lies, the way my mother dismissed my pain as moodiness, the way my father refused to admit fault, the way Chloe looked at my life like a game board and tried to steal every piece that mattered. So I said yes. I called Daniel that night and told him. He didn't hesitate. "Let's go," he said. "I can work remotely. I don't care where we live as long as we're not looking over our shoulders." I listed the apartment, packed my studio, and within 6 weeks we were driving across the country. It wasn't easy. Every mile away from Portland felt like a layer peeling off my skin. There were moments I cried for no reason, others when I felt pure rage. But then we arrived. Vermont was quiet, clean, green in a way that felt untouched. We rented a small cottage near the office and filled it with secondhand furniture and mismatched mugs. I got to design again without fear or judgment. I built spaces that felt like breath wide open healing, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt proud without waiting for someone else to ruin it. Daniel proposed again this time with no audience. Just us in the woods under a sky full of stars. I said yes again. Not because I needed a ring, but because I was finally choosing from a place of clarity, not fear. We married in a tiny ceremony with no family. Just 2 friends, a minister, and the sound of wind through the trees. No one from home was invited, and no one asked why. That was the beauty of starting over. You didn't have to explain the ghosts you left behind. A few months later, I started writing. Not a memoir. Just stories. Pieces of memory. Fragments of truth. I didn't name names. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to reclaim my voice. My therapist said I was retraining my nervous system, teaching it that not all silence meant danger, that solitude could be peace, not punishment. Then came the letter. Not an email, not a call. An actual handwritten letter from my mother. It arrived on my birthday. Inside was a card with flowers and the words, "You'll always be my first." There was a check folded into the crease, $1,000. No explanation, no apology, just her way of trying to buy back access. I ripped it up, not out of anger, out of clarity. You cannot purchase trust. You cannot decorate over rot. I sent her a message. Do not contact me again unless it's to acknowledge what happened and take responsibility. She didn't reply, and that silence was all the confirmation I needed. Chloe tried once more. She emailed me from a new account. No greeting, no closure. Just a photo of her at some retreat holding a crystal, smiling like enlightenment. The subject line said, "I'm healing." Are you? I blocked it. Healing isn't performative. It's not about pretending you've grown. It's about doing the work, sitting with your own darkness, owning what you've broken. And Chloe had never once picked up a piece. But I had. I was rebuilding something she'd never understand. Not just a life, but a self. One she could no longer touch. The strange thing about cutting ties is that people don't believe you'll follow through. They think you're making a statement, a scene, something temporary that will fade once emotions cool. But I didn't cool. I clarified. The more time I spent away from them, the more I understood how deep the damage had gone, and the more I saw how little they understood accountability. Chloe resurfaced again about a year after our move, not through me, but through a mutual acquaintance. A friend from high school messaged me with a screenshot of a GoFundMe page. Chloe had posted a story about rebuilding after betrayal. She said she had lost everything due to a toxic smear campaign and needed help launching a wellness startup. The photo showed her sitting cross-legged in a minimalist studio, eyes closed, hands on knees, as if she were some guru rising from the ashes. The comments were flooded with sympathy. People saying how brave she was, how cruel it is when family turns on you. I didn't respond. I didn't share my side. I didn't engage. But others did. A few people who had known us both who had seen the patterns began commenting back, gently at first, then firmly. Someone even posted a link to a private blog I'd been anonymously contributing to. I never named her, but the stories were too familiar. Within a week, the campaign was removed. No public explanation. No apology. Just silence. Daniel said it best. Sometimes the truth doesn't need a megaphone. It just needs to last longer than the lie. My parents were next. I found out through a cousin that their reputation in the community had taken a hit. Apparently, someone had sent a printed copy of my blog to the local paper, anonymously. It was never published, but word spread, the quiet kind of rumor that doesn't fade. My father lost a major client. My mother stopped being invited to social events. For people like them, that was equivalent to exile. Again, I didn't gloat. It didn't bring me joy, but it brought balance. It reminded me that the world does notice, that consequences are real even if they come softly. Then, on a cold February morning, I got an email from my mother. The subject line was blank. The body said only this: "If I could go back, I would have believed you." I didn't reply, not because I was angry. I wasn't. I was done. That same week, I finalized paperwork to open my own design studio, a quiet space filled with light and plants and reclaimed wood. Clients came word spread, and suddenly I had a waiting list. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building, loving, living. I began mentoring young women entering the field. I told them the truth, that boundaries are not cruelty, that silence isn't peace, that sometimes walking away is the most loving thing you can do for yourself. Daniel and I began talking about children, slowly, carefully, not as a replacement for what I'd lost, but as a continuation of what we'd created. And one night, after a long walk and a lot of laughter, I looked at him and said, "If we have a daughter, I want her to know that love is not something you have to earn." He smiled. "She'll know, because she'll have you." That was the justice I needed. Not revenge, not destruction, but creation. A life where pain didn't define me, where betrayal didn't break me, where my voice was no longer a whisper but a foundation. I no longer wondered if they would change. I no longer checked Chloe's pages or waited for my mother to call. I let the past be the past, not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer controlled me. And that more than anything was freedom. There's something time teaches you that nothing else can. Not books, not advice, not even pain. Only time, in its slow and relentless unfolding, reveals which battles mattered and which were just echoes of old wounds. I used to believe family was everything, that blood was sacred, that forgiveness was the highest virtue. But what no one told me is that forgiveness without truth becomes a prison. That unconditional loyalty can be a slow death when it's given to people who never deserved it. I think a lot about the women who came before me, my mother, her mother, generations of women who swallowed their pain, smoothed over chaos, and called it strength. They stayed, they endured. They kept the family together at all costs, but no one ever asked what those costs truly were. I used to think strength meant silence. Now I know it means speaking even when your voice trembles, especially when it trembles. It means walking away when every part of you wants to stay and try again. It means choosing peace over performance. I've met older women in Vermont who've told me their own stories, tales of betrayal of children who don't speak to them, of husbands who were never really there. And you know what I've learned, that healing isn't just for the young, that it's never too late to choose differently. One woman in her 70s told me I didn't learn to stand up for myself until I was 58. Before that, I just kept quiet and hoped people would see how much I was hurting. They never did. That stayed with me. Because it's true. People see what they want to see. And unless you say it, unless you live it out loud, your truth stays hidden beneath everyone else's version of who you are. So if you're listening to this and you're older than me, maybe twice my age, maybe more, let me say this as gently and clearly as I can. It is not too late to stop performing. It is not too late to stop keeping the peace at the expense of your soul. You don't owe anyone your silence, not your spouse, not your parents, not even your children. Your life belongs to you. Your story belongs to you. And the best part is, it's still being written. Every morning you wake up is another chance to draw a line, to say, this ends with me. Maybe your Chloe is a sister, a brother, a husband, a grown child who never learned respect. Maybe you've been the peacekeeper so long you've forgotten what peace even feels like. Let me remind you, it feels like quiet that doesn't make you tense. It feels like love that doesn't make you small. It feels like coming home to yourself. That is the life I chose, and that is the life I hope for you too. It's early morning now, the kind of quiet that feels earned. I'm sitting by the window of our cottage wrapped in a sweater that smells like cedar and lavender, watching the light spill slowly across the floorboards. Daniel is still asleep in the next room. There's a mug of tea in my hand and a notebook in my lap. In that notebook are sketches for a nursery, soft colors, open space, shelves for storybooks, a rocking chair by the window where I imagine holding our child while the wind dances through the trees. We found out last week that I'm pregnant. The test was positive, and I cried in the bathroom not out of fear, but out of a strange, overwhelming calm, a knowing that this child will never feel what I felt. They will grow up in a home where love is not earned with silence, where apologies are not withheld like weapons, where their truth is not something to be feared. I won't be a perfect mother. I've let go of that illusion, but I will be honest. I will listen. I will protect the softness in them even as the world tries to harden it. And I will tell them over and over that they matter, that their voice matters, that love is something you give, not something you demand. Someday when they are old enough to understand, I will tell them my story. Not all the details, just enough to show them that we come from people who got it wrong, and that we get to choose to do it right. I will tell them that their grandmother once wrote me a letter too late, that their aunt never knew how to love without taking, and that it is okay to love people from a distance. That family is not defined by pain. It's defined by how we show up for each other when it matters. The cycle ends here, not with anger, not with revenge, but with a promise that I will give them the safety I never had, and in doing so, I will finally give it to myself.